There was a proposal made by politicians in New York City to pay private residents to house migrants in their homes. All news footage used in this video is under fair use of United States copyright law of 1976 and is used in conjunction with my commentary.
And it's not just these houses of worship that could be welcoming migrants.
That's right. Mayor Adams also suggesting today that the city could pay people to house migrants in private residences. Sharon Crowley has more on the mayor's idea and whether he has the power to actually make it policy. Sharon.
Yeah, Steve, New Yorkers willing to take in an asylum seeker into their home could be paid by the city for doing just that. It's a hypothetical right now. The mayor's considering every option as he looks to find new ways to house thousands of newcomers who continue to arrive in the city each week.
The closer we bring the asylum seekers and the migrants to everyday New Yorkers, the easier it will be for them to transition into society.
Mayor Adams saying he's open to paying private homeowners to put up asylum seekers. Right now, it's just an idea that he's floating.
It's cheaper and it's a good investment for us to go to a family and assist them instead of placing people in large congregate settings or in these emergency hotels.
Each week, thousands of single adults and families arrive here on buses from border states. The mayor says finding housing for everyone has become increasingly difficult. He recruited faith leaders to open up churches, synagogues, and mosques. And now the mayor is considering taking things a step further by asking private homeowners to share their space. The mayor says any New Yorker willing to house migrants would be paid by the city.
Technically, short-term rentals of 30 days or less are illegal in New York City. So if this is going to be something less than 30 days, they would have to change the existing law.
New York City civil rights attorney Ken Belkin says the mayor could issue an executive order to temporarily change laws.
Given the state of the crisis with the influx of migrants into New York City, it's unprecedented, and I do think his emergency powers would allow him to make an executive order to do this.
The mayor has proposed a number of shelter options since the start of this crisis, many ending in controversy. An earlier plan to house men in tents on City Island and then on Randall's Island was scrapped amid flooding concerns. Putting migrants in school gyms also fell flat with parents and students. It means the mayor has been forced to get creative, and he'll have to keep it up as each week new families keep coming.
This is not sustainable.
Well, the mayor says the shelter system is already stretched to its limits. I reached out to the New York Immigration Coalition to see what they think of housing asylum seekers in private homes here in New York City, and they told me they don't have a response yet since it's still just an idea. Steve?
All right, to be continued. Thanks, Sharon.
Now, according to reports, the city is proposing to pay private residences $125 a day if they will house a migrant in their spare room. And when I take a critical examination of this proposal, it just shows how pride leads to a fall. Now, the main reason why we are having all of these problems as related to housing migrants is due to the fact that the city refuses to concede and admit that their whole concept of a sanctuary city is a failure. Now, this whole concept of a sanctuary city was one that was proposed around 2016 as then Mayor Bill de Blasio wanted to go out here and try to show Donald Trump how New York City wasn't racist like Donald Trump was. Now, the great irony of this whole proposal was that Donald Trump himself came from New York, and with Donald Trump coming from New York, it just seems like this whole proposal for a sanctuary city was a bit of a paradox with Donald Trump coming from a blue state. Now, a lot of other cities in blue states like Chicago and Los Angeles went and made the same sanctuary city proposal, and this was a proposal based on ideals, not really rooted in anything realistic. However, as we went into 2022, then Governor Greg Abbott decided to test this proposal and decided to start sending migrants, busing them to many of the blue cities such as Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. And New York City, out of all of the so-called sanctuary cities, has been hit very hard economically, and the city itself has spent billions of dollars trying to house migrants all across the city. And unfortunately, the city is overwhelmed by just 40 to 50,000 migrants and still can't handle the load. Unfortunately, because the city mayor refuses to swallow his pride and admit that the policy is a failure, he continues to go on trying to maintain a policy that he himself admits is just unsustainable. And this latest proposal is completely unsustainable because it just is an issue that would lead to many families and homes being put at risk and many neighborhoods' quality of life being driven into a state of decline, because the whole idea of housing a migrant in somebody's private residence is something that violates, I believe, the Third Amendment as related to the quartering of troops, because it is extremely similar to the quartering of troops in somebody's home, and it just is something that is unconstitutional. Moreover, I believe that it is extremely immoral to ask someone to take a illegal immigrant who has violated our laws into their private residence, and $125 a day is not enough as related to intangibles such as a person's safety or a person's ability to have their quality of life. That is something that flies over the head of the mayor of New York City as related to this asinine proposal. He's not really thinking about how this is going to impact the quality of life for private residence owners, and not thinking about the danger he's putting them in, because many of these migrants, they have not been vetted as related to their backgrounds. I mean, you've got people who have, one, entered the country illegally, and two, there is no background check on these individuals. So you would be putting private residences and the residents of those homes in danger, because we don't know who these individuals are. We don't know if these individuals are criminals. We don't know if these individuals are terrorists. We don't know where these individuals come from, and it's just a high risk as related to people's safety, and this could lead to people possibly putting their lives in jeopardy, because the whole idea of housing a stranger inside of a person's home, it's something that just, again, is not something any smart person would propose, but only an extremely desperate person would go out here and propose this, because they've basically run out of ideas. And the reason why they have run out of ideas is because they're too proud to admit that they're wrong. And when it comes down to this whole policy of sanctuary city, those in the blue party are wrong, and they just don't want to take the L and admit that they fucked up. Because the whole point of this whole situation becoming as dire as it is because people don't want to swallow their pride, and they don't want to swallow their pride because they fear that they may lose the election in 2025, but you may wind up losing the election in 2025 and make New York a red city, because you just don't want to swallow your pride and admit that this whole approach is absolutely wrong. Because we have laws in this country as related to our borders for a reason, and if you are sent migrants, you don't have any obligation to house them at all. Now, what I find to be even more troubling is that the city has spent billions on these migrants. Meanwhile, homeless people, who are a 56% population of black people, cannot get any services. And that's really troubling, because it was a majority of black people who went out to vote for this blue party in 2020, 2022, and 2021 for the blue party, and black people who desperately need services like Jordan Neely can't get any services or help, even though they are U.S. citizens and are supposed to be first in line. And that's what's really troubling here about this whole case. We have American citizens like our veterans who served this country fighting in wars, brothers who came out of the foster system like Jordan Neely, who desperately need these services as related to getting themselves back on track. But those individuals are just pushed out of the way, all because the politicians here in New York basically want to go out here and bootlick and brown nose Joe Biden and believe that if they go out here and house the migrants under this dysfunctional sanctuary city policy, that they will be able to go out here and be able to gain his favor, even though Biden has basically disappeared off the face of the earth as related to this whole situation with migrants being bussed into New York City and destroying the quality of life here in New York City. Because here in New York City, you cannot even get into a hotel if you're out here looking to travel or be a tourist, because most of the hotels have been booked up, filled with migrants, and filled with migrants being paid for with city dollars. And again, this is impacting the overall quality of life because we've had many city services budgets cut, all to take care of those who are not citizens, and those taxpayers are not getting the services that they deserve, all because we have a party filled with a bunch of politicians all out to try to maintain an ideal, not seeing the real consequences and how those real consequences are impacting the lives of residents here in New York City. No, it's all about trying to have some sort of arrogance and pride as related to trying to stand up for a so-called ideal. And sadly, as they stand up for the so-called ideal, the reality is that the quality of life here in New York City is starting to decline, and it's starting to decline to the point where it's starting to become squalid conditions. But that doesn't matter, because what the Blue Party politicians want to do is try to go out here and try to show folks like Greg Abbott that, oh, our policy is working, but it's clear your policy isn't working because you're having fiscal problems, you're having issues as related to trying to take care of all of these individuals, and you don't want to admit that Greg Abbott was right, that this is an issue as related to securing the border. And he has more experience on it and knows that as a state with many border towns, that you have to secure your border to ensure that you make sure that you can keep these kinds of individuals from coming in illegally. Because what happens is that these individuals, what happens is you have criminals and even terrorists coming into your country. And again, what's really scary is I don't think anybody will wake up until a 9/11 style incident happens. But the whole thing is you have people who are in leadership, and the people in leadership are too proud to admit that they're wrong, too proud to admit that they fucked up, and just sitting there trying to float these asinine and insane ideas, like trying to house migrants inside of a school gym, which is one of the craziest things I have ever heard. And once that got shouted down by parents, they then came up with this absolutely backwards proposal, which would basically put a lot of New York City residents in jeopardy if they went along with this. Because if you have a complete stranger in your home, this is going to again put your safety at risk. 1. 2, you may wind up liable if this individual winds up getting injured in your home. So if you bring this illegal immigrant into your home, there's a possibility you might be on the hook for a civil lawsuit if they wind up getting injured in your home, and that's going to cost more than $125 to go out here and deal with. Moreover, there's a clause as related to somebody staying in your home for more than 30 days. If they stay in your home for more than 30 days, that person is considered a resident of that home, and then you have to go through the housing courts to have that individual evicted. And as somebody who had a family member who worked in landlord and tenant law, I can tell you that it is a nightmare to try to get somebody out of a home, because what that individual will do is continue to file order to show causes and remain inside of that residence for years on end, making it a basic nightmare as related to having that person in their residence. So when I listen to this proposal, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I also listen to them talking about, oh, how they're going to try to change the laws. Well, has anybody understood how bureaucracy works? I mean, bureaucracy here in New York basically takes years and even decades to change laws. And with the city council, it takes years for a proposal to be brought to the table. So this whole idea, it just shows again me a lack of leadership, a complete act of desperation, and shows the just complete incompetence that is here, because it shows that here we have an individual again looking to go out here and gain brownie points with the Biden administration, and when that failed, now is at their wits' end and trying to go out here and trying to mismanage a situation, showing how completely over their head they are. Because the only solution to dealing with these migrants is to go out here and admit that the policy of a sanctuary city is a failure and start turning those buses back. That is how you deal with that situation. That is what a leader does who has integrity. They concede, okay, this approach I have applied does not work. This approach I have applied does not function. This approach I'm applying is not feasible and it is not sustainable. And the only solution is to concede, hey, this just doesn't work, and fall on the sword, because to continue maintaining this where you just don't have the fiscal money and the resources to maintain it out of pride just shows how arrogant the politicians in New York City are. And always with pride, you always have a fall, because a person who is too proud to admit that they're wrong is a person who is destined to wind up with an ignominious end. And again, if you don't want to admit that something is wrong, that really is a testament to your character, because a man of character is going to admit, okay, this doesn't work. Okay, this isn't feasible. Okay, this isn't sustainable, and rescind the whole sanctuary city, because the whole sanctuary city is not something that is legal. It is just a symbolic statement that was made to spite Donald Trump. And the great irony is that with Donald Trump coming from New York and New York politicians out here trying to spite him, they actually prove his point, basically proving his arguments as related to the border by their own actions. And that's the thing that many are, it's just flying over their head, because they're sitting there thinking, oh, we can do this. No, you can't do this. And the more you keep trying to do the impossible, the more you are participating in the definition of insanity, which is trying to do the exact same thing and expect a different result. Because the only result that we've seen in other countries like the UK and Europe with migrants is that efforts to try to house these individuals has basically crushed a lot of those countries' ability to maintain their quality of life. It has basically led to a lot of individuals creating squalid conditions, and it has not really improved these people's ways as related to their survival. Yes, there are a lot of people who made a lot of money as related to the getting government aid, but those people are not really improving their quality of life. No, they're living in poverty just like they did in their country. Meanwhile, people like black people, they're not getting any tangibles for their services, and that's really sad, because we've got a black mayor, we've got a black public advocate, we've got a majority black city council, and all of these individuals are basically proving the point of racists who make movies like Birth of a Nation. Because when I look at New York City, it's just like what every racist said as related to the movie Birth of a Nation, that if you put blacks in leadership roles, they will go out here and be so incompetent. that they will basically run the city straight into the ground. And that's what's happening right now as related to this migrant policy. And this migrant policy, again, is just on because people don't want to swallow their pride, and they don't want to swallow their pride because they fear that they'll lose the election if this is a concession that they make. But you're going to lose anyway, because if people see you as incompetent, they're going to say this person just can't do the job. And again, with these black politicians, these black bootlicks, they don't see the paradox that they're in. They don't see that this is a lose-lose situation. They have been set up in, and they have been set up for failure. And as they've been set up for failure, there's a grooming of a white savior being done at this point, because the incompetence here is just absolutely mind-boggling and mind-blowing. It's just absolutely mind-blowing that people are this incompetent, because you're proposing bringing people into private residences in their homes. And again, this violates the Third Amendment of our Constitution as related to the quartering of individuals. And again, this is quartering illegal individuals who are not citizens. And it also is something that basically would put a lot of New Yorkers in jeopardy, because if this person stays in a person's home for 30 days, that person is now a resident, and that person will never be moved from that home. So only a fool would go out here and say, oh, I'll take in a migrant. And a critical question I have to ask those members in the Blue Party: how about you take those people into your home? Because after you have to deal with the liability issues, you'll realize how stupid a proposal this is. And it's just easier to just admit you fucked up, and admit you fucked up, and own your fuck up, because this kind of proposal just basically makes them look like they're completely idiotic. And again, just shows you that what happens when you have a complete lack of leadership from the executive branch to the city council to the judicial branch here in New York. I mean, the whole state is just politically dysfunctional. And it's politically dysfunctional because you have individuals who, again, too proud to admit that they're wrong, too proud to admit that they're on the wrong track, too proud to admit that they've screwed up. And what's even more dysfunctional is you've got residents who continue to vote for these morons instead of saying, hey, this person just can't do the job, and demand that we get somebody in here who can lead. This person can't do the work, and admit that this just isn't working. Because again, bringing a migrant into somebody's home is just as stupid a proposal as bringing them into a gym where kids are in school. Again, you have illegal individuals who we don't know the background of, don't know where they're coming from, and they're floating the idea, okay, we want to bring these individuals in, but bringing these individuals into places, again, is destroying the quality of life in New York City. And the only course you have is to send these individuals back, because you have no legal obligation to support those who come into a country illegally. No, if the federal government doesn't want to take care of them, then states don't need to give them sanctuary. And it's time for New York's politicians to concede and admit that the sanctuary city concept is just one big failure. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct Imprint, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s with this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, 1987 at online booksellers everywhere.